Great. So this afternoon we have Milind, CEO of Xare. Milind, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me and have a chat.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Great. So look, let's just kick off with the basics, right? Tell me a bit about the driving force that led to the creation of Xare. Obviously, you've done great things, in a relatively short period of time. What was behind it? Where did it come from?
Yeah, so we were building a business which was focused on migrants in the region, right? Which was focused on helping migrants manage their finances better. And, we were quite successful in doing that leading up to COVID. And then during COVID, what we realized is that the one part of that proposition which we had not looked at, which was basically remittances, was actually the biggest challenge, right? So in COVID, you couldn't send cash, you couldn't receive cash, you couldn't spend cash. We had all these people sitting with bank accounts that we had provided them over here, but it was actually useless, right? Because the process of remittances was still largely cash driven. So that's where the idea of Xare was born, right? It was born with the simple notion, why do I need to move money to allow my family to spend? I should just be able to move the ability to spend that I have over here to my family, wherever they are. And so that's how we hit on the concept of Xare, where you can basically just share your card with your family anywhere in the world and allow them to spend like they actually have access to the card without knowing your card details and within limits and controls that you specified.
Which is key, right?
Which is key, yeah. So effectively, it's like a supplementary card being issued to somebody without involving a bank. So that's what the genesis and the idea of Xare was. And once we built it, we realized it was not just a migrant problem, right? If you really think about it, every single dollar of consumer spending anywhere in the world goes from the income earner to the dependent, right? And most people in the world don't work. All financial products are for the income earner. And somehow that money has to flow from the income earner to the dependent. So that's how Xare has grown. It's become a tool which income earners, whether migrant or not, use to extend their financial access to people they care about without involving a bank.
Look, I mean, the case for remittance is clear, right? I mean, this is a problem that, many financial institutions, fintechs, et cetera, have been trying to resolve, right? But if you even go beyond remittance, the interesting that is, Xare has evolved, obviously, your product line as well to include, insurance, to include BNPL now that you recently launched. Tell me a bit about, let's say, that kind of portfolio expansion.
I mean, as I was saying, right, if you think about it, every single financial product in the world is actually designed for somebody who is earning an income, right? You want a loan, you have to have an income. You want to get insurance, how much do you want? Investments, the same thing, right? But most of the world doesn't work, right? So when you build a tool which allows the income earner to share their financial access with their dependents, you not only can share a card, which is the easy thing to do, which is what we are doing, but you can also share other access you have. You have a credit line, why can't you share it? So if you're a migrant sitting over here and you have a credit line of 2,000 dirhams, how do you share that credit line with your family because your family is the one that's spending there? How do you share your insurance access? How do you share your investment access? And those are the sort of portfolio of propositions that we have been building.
You say that's the easy part, right? I don't know how many people would agree that, let's say, just the movement of money, let's say, or the remittance piece is easy. But, regardless of that, I think it's super impressive, let's say, the geographic touch that you have as an organization, right? I mean, some startups focus on a specific market or a specific corridor. They say, look, Dubai to Pakistan is, obviously a valuable and significant corridor. Let's start there and let's go beyond. But here you are, and more than 3 million users touching over 180 countries, right? Talk to me a bit about how that evolved, right? And how do you cover that, say, such a vast market?
So couple of things happened, right? Launching in the UAE was a big advantage because what is suddenly happening is, let's say you're an Indian, you're working with a Kenyan or a Nigerian or somebody from Poland, and you're suddenly saying, look, instead of sending money across, what I'm doing is I'm just going to share my card with my family in India. And people are like, wow, that's neat, right? Because it's an easy thing to do. And so suddenly people start using it. So what happens is, by definition, Xare only works when you have somebody who's sharing a card and somebody who's receiving a card, right? If an Indian is sharing a card, then somebody in India needs to get on board to be able to use it, right? So the same thing happens in Poland, something happens in Nigeria. And it just grew word of mouth, right? So, and people started using us for far more than, just remittances, right? So one of the things that we realized what people were using us for was just trading credit card points or credit card opportunities. For example, you have a Citibank card, which gives you 10% off on Amazon. I have a FAB card, which gives me 10% off on Noon. We don't have each other's cards, but we can just share to allow that to happen. Mm-hmm. So that's how the movement has grown, right? Effectively, what people have realized now is that they can actually share their card securely with somebody. And it's mainly word of mouth, and that's, as you keep doing more things, it just keeps growing.
I like how you refer to it as a movement, right? Yeah. It's really you're making an impact on community. Yeah. Talk to me a bit about that, Obviously, the fundamentals of this was really about financial inclusion, right? You were looking at, this, call it, segment of the population that was having great difficulty moving value back home to their, friends and loved ones, et cetera, in order to cover, let's say that. But, the community, right? What is Xare doing, let's say, to focus on community empowerment? What are your thoughts, let's say, around that?
Yeah, so I think there's multiple layers to this answer, right? But at the heart of it is this idea that financial product creation or banking actually has only been with the big banks or the fintechs, right? So effectively, you are the one who creates a bank, right? If you think of a very simple thing, think for any credit to happen in the market, what do you need, right? You need two things. You need cash, so I have money to be able to give somebody, and the risk appetite, right? So I need to be able to say that, hey, look, Paolo, I trust you, I'll give you the money. The problem is, as banking is more centralized, more and more of that power goes to a few institutions to make those decisions, right?
Right.
And what we are doing with Xare is we are somehow breaking that down and bringing it back to the community, right? So there will be far more people who are willing to take a bet on you, but may not have the cash. But guess what? They have credit lines. Now, suddenly you have taken their unused credit line and made it liquid. So I have a credit card limit of 10,000 dirhams. I'm not using it. I'll extend that credit limit to you. So I don't need a cash to be able to extend it. And that's the beauty of what we're doing at Xare, right? I mean, if you know the word banking, it originally just came from banca, which was the Italian word for bench, sitting across the table and transacting, right? And that's not what banking is now like, right? So banking has become this really nameless, faceless institution with all the challenges and issues, right? So somehow we are bringing the power of banking, which is basically helping people transact, back to their everyday individuals, right? And that for us is the biggest part of what we're building with Xare.
What about the app? Right. Obviously, that's the main interface. Let's say that your users, both on the send side and receive side, are interacting. What about features, aspects of the app? How does that help? Right. How much of your business is really focused on app development and that interaction? The analytics behind it, making tweaks, etc.
So the app is at the heart of what we do, right? Because effectively, for us to be able to what we would call as create a synthetic card, right? Which there's no really card being issued, right? Ability to spend from one person to the other person. It all sits on the app, right? And there's a couple of really neat things about the app, right? The first is the tech stack itself, right? Initially I said that's easy, but it's completely, nobody has ever done this before, right? Secondly, it's not centralized, right? So it's like, if you come to the app and add your card, I'm not going to take your card data, store it somewhere and send it, right? So it's completely decentralized. The data either sits on your device or it sits on the device of the person you share it with. So there's no risk of the data being compromised. And third, because of the sheer nature of how this grows, right? Because effectively this is viral by definition, right? You have one person, then the other person comes on board, then they use it for something else, then the third person comes on board. A lot of what we'll end up doing is, having a great analytics and growth team. So we hired some really smart people in there. Most of our tech is sitting out of Eastern Europe. So we have managed to sort of, have geo hubs of people who are really good in that particular aspect. And we have used that to sort of build and grow.
Yeah, look, I think it's incredibly important, right? That, at the core of this is really a technology company, correct, right? And the amount of effort and, resources you put behind building that tech stack, that's your unique IP.
Correct.
That's a very unique asset, right?
Correct.
Then building upon that, the services, et cetera, of course, is what ultimately, let's say, attracts and retains your consumers, your users, right?
Correct.
And what about the concept of value, right? Obviously, this is a very value-driven community that you're serving. What steps do you take at Xare, let's say, to ensure that value is there? Because we've seen so many instances, let's say, of organizations that are trying to serve that that diaspora group, but then at the end of the day, if you look at the product, you see, okay, this might be instant, it might be fast, it might be direct to the individual, but they're losing 15%, 20% of the value in that, let's say, cross-border transaction.
Correct.
What sort of steps are you taking as an organization to ensure that value-driven, stays at the ethos and the fundamental of your company?
I think so. There's again multiple parts to that answer, right? I think the first one is, and it's a stunning stat, right? But if you look at an average migrant over here, they don't remit once. They remit on an average at about 1.5 times. You need to ask yourself, why the hell do they do that, right? Fees are extremely expensive, as you rightly highlighted, to do it.
Yeah.
And the reason they do it is because they don't actually believe they have any control on where the money is being spent. They're scared, right? I mean, so you come here first year, like, awesome, I'm going to send my money to my family back home. Then year 2, year 10, year 15, and you're still sending it, right? You're still living a very frugal life. and your family is living it up. And obviously, as both sides get used to that cash flow, things happen, things which are not necessarily great. So the biggest value we bring as a company to the table is we give the income earner control and visibility on where the money is being spent, right? Because when that happens, they're like, okay, so I know now where the money is going, right? And in a sense, if you look at it, right, the service is free, right? So basically, when we are helping you move the ability to spend across, we don't charge you anything, right? We make money from merchants who are sort of, happy that now suddenly they're getting transactions from somebody that, was not transacting on them before or was transacting on cash, right? So for example, let's say one of our merchant partners in India was actually, let's say Snapdeal, right? One of the largely cash on delivery business, right? Now suddenly they are seeing a spike in business cards being used to transact, which makes their business easier, and they are happy to share the pie. So for migrants, that's value number one, right? The second thing is, and again, in our partnership as well, we sort of emphasize it, right? There are a lot of people which land up overcharging, as you're saying, usurious, right? Small denomination you're trying to send across, the charges are very high. Right. So what we have tried to do is sort of be very transparent, be very open, pass as much value back to the customer as possible, and then build on that base, right? Build on that trust to do more things.
It's just so extremely important, right?
Of course.
Because I see so many of these schemes out there, let's say, where that ultimate value really is not serving the growth, right? Because one thing is to look at a market and say, look, we understand that there's a corridor there's an opportunity for us to disrupt it. But I think the real test is if you start to deliver that value, right? The consumers understand and start to appreciate that value very quickly. And it's not that you're taking away, let's say, from that existing corridor value, you're actually growing that corridor, right? Because now they have an alternative method whereby to deliver more value back. And that can change the frequency with which, let's say, they're sending value back home. That can change let's say, the product itself, right? That kind of productized move away from, I'm just sending cash, as you said, but I'm not so sure, let's say, how that cash is going to be spent, right? And is it really going towards, what I know needs to happen back in the receiving country?
And most people know it's not, right? I mean, it's there's a reason why. So, I mean, if you look at Kerala, classic example, right? One of the largest migrant base in the world, right? So the first generation came out 30 years ago, right? By that thesis, the second generation would never have needed to step out, but they do. And the third generation is going to do the same, because what happens is you get used to this cash pool, you generate wealth, but you don't really land up saving anything, right? And so it's structurally a challenge, right? And the best way to, solve it is to bring back control to the person who's putting in the hard work and effort and earning it and saying, look, now you have visibility and control on where this is going. And that's what we try to do.
Very true. Look, I think it's fantastic what you're doing for financial inclusion. And what about the future? So obviously you've done incredible things since the start. A little look into the crystal ball, the next 5 years.
Yeah. So, if you come to our offices, we have this tagline which says building a billion banks, right? And we truly believe that, because if you really think about it, what is a bank? A retail bank, right? I mean, there's multiple components to a bank. A retail bank basically is something that does two things, right? It gives you a payment instrument so you don't carry cash around. It used to be a checkbook earlier, then it became card, then it became wallets, then it's going to be 50 other things, but that's instrument A, right? And B, it gives you credit, right? Because I'm going to give you something, so you don't need to pay now, you can pay later. What we're doing with Xare is bringing that power, right, to everyday individuals, right? And saying, okay, effectively, when you, as a head of the household, are giving somebody a payment instrument and giving somebody a line of credit, you're effectively behaving like a bank, right? You are the bank to your tribe, right? And if you take that power and sort of really go and say what this means for the future, right? You can totally envisage a world where, the example we always give is, think of what would be possible with the Wi-Fi router. If you didn't have a Wi-Fi router, what would this look like, right? You would need to go get a SIM to connect everything. Every time you go to Etisalat or do and ask them for something. That's how banking today works, right? It's centralized issuance of things. Everything is KYC'd, everything is a pain. We have built the router for finance, which allows individuals to share their access. And we are actually just really in step one of that journey, right? As we keep building the stack, as we keep doing more things, it's completely conceivable banking 10 years from now would look very different, because everyday individuals could actually share and extend their access with people they care about without doing a KYC, without trying to engineer trust and saying, hey, look, do you have your Emirates ID? Do I know you? Can you bring this document triplicate signed? Without trying to use this concept of a credit score, which is such a made up concept, right? Of who does it protect? It protects the bank, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't do anything for the individual. And there are so many apps out there which just focus on improving your credit score. It's like improving the number of Facebook likes you have. Again, doesn't mean anything, right? I think we have an opportunity to be able to bring banking back to the masses, to the core of what banking was, right? Which was individuals and communities helping each other. And if we empower them with more tools and build the stack up, there's no telling where this will go.
Milind, congratulations and kudos to you and the team. Right, I think that the impact that Xare is having on the community is really very impressive and commendable. So, thanks for taking some time out and joining me and talking about what you're doing and really looking forward to working closely with you guys and continuing to make an impact. Yeah,
sounds great. Thank you for having me.